The Mafia boss slapped Elvis Presley right on stage at the International Hotel in front of 3,500 people, and that night, Las Vegas witnessed something no one ever thought could happen. Bumpy Johnson stepped forward and stopped everything. There are stories in Vegas that become legends, stories that don't need anyone to verify every detail because their essence already says something too real about this city. They spread from the bartenders at the Flamingo to the dealers at Caesars, from security staff to lounge singers. They exist because they expose the real power that runs Vegas. This is one of those stories. The story of the night a great artist stood before violence and a Harlem boss drew a line that even the Las Vegas Mafia had to back away from. July 31st, 1969, the International Showroom was packed. Elvis Presley had just returned to Vegas after a long time away from the stage, and the audience that night came to witness his comeback. Elvis had been performing for nearly an hour, his voice and energy carrying the entire room along with every note. Then something happened, something those who were there still talk about years. The drunk Mafia boss walked up the stage steps, went straight to Elvis and, according to many witnesses, slapped him right under the lights. No one had time to react. The sound echoed through the auditorium, signaling something terrible had just occurred. That was when an unexpected figure appeared. That person was Bumpy Johnson, the Harlem boss feared across the East Coast. His presence in the building that night remains debated. But what happened next, no one denies. He stepped out into the blazing lights, where Elvis was still unsteady after the slap, and completely changed the outcome of that performance. But before getting to that legendary moment, there are three things you need to know: who Elvis Presley really was in 1969, how Las Vegas operated under the Mafia's shadow back then, and why Bumpy Johnson was the kind of man who could risk everything to step forward in that fateful second. Elvis Presley, in 1969, wasn't just America's biggest star, he was the center of a comeback the whole Vegas watched. After nearly a decade sunk in movies he himself hated, Elvis faced his return at the International Hotel with raw, intense energy and a burning desire to prove he was still the king. But to understand why that slap ignited a real storm, you have to know Elvis carried something that made some underworld powers uncomfortable. He loved gospel, blues, and everything that made Southern black music. From Memphis to Tupelo, he grew up amid black church singing, among musicians never allowed on national radio. Elvis brought that music into the light, singing it with absolute respect, and because of that millions loved him. But that very thing made some conservative white power figures and certain Vegas Mafia guys see him as a thorn. In their eyes, Elvis was erasing boundaries they wanted to keep firm. The boundary between black culture and white America's stages, and Las Vegas in 1969 was still Mafia territory, no matter how bright the neon lights. The International Hotel had just opened. Elvis was the first star to sign a long-term contract there. But the whole city still ran by unwritten rules. From the Flamingo to Caesar's Palace, every casino had someone behind it, and no performer had illusions they were protected by law more than by the wishes of men sitting in windowless offices. And then there was Bumpy Johnson, someone very few in the audience that night knew was in the same building. The Harlem boss had come to Vegas to talk business with a New York Mafia branch about controlling the decades-old numbers racket system. But the bigger coincidence was the presence of little Bobby Fields, a Harlem singer Elvis had once saved from a humiliating night. In 1956, Bobby was blocked backstage at a show just because of his skin color. Elvis saw it, brought him on stage to sing together, and told the organizers, If Bobby can't go on, neither will I. Bobby told that story to Bumpy for years, with gratitude that never faded. In Bumpy's world, favors were worth more than money, more than power. He never forgot those who treated Harlem people decently, even if that person was Elvis Presley. And because of that, when Elvis was in danger at the International Hotel, fate placed Bumpy Johnson in the exact right place, right time, just before the real explosion happened. With the man who had planted the seeds for the entire chaos of that night. Frank Calderone wasn't the kind of man Elvis Presley or any artist wanted to upset. He was a capo handling Las Vegas for the Chicago outfit, the guy with stakes in the Flamingo, Stardust, Dunes, and all kinds of backstage deals no one dared question too deeply. To tourists, Calderone was just a businessman showing up at casino openings. But to those really running Vegas, he was the one who could make a singer disappear from every bill with one call. And Calderone hated Elvis Presley, not because Elvis was famous or because rock music disrupted Vegas, but because Elvis had refused a 2-year contract his organization wanted to control. That contract, like many in Vegas, wasn't just about performing, it was about cash flow. About how the Mafia laundered millions through regular hard-to-track shows. Elvis said no, not because he was against the Mafia, but because he wanted to keep his artistic freedom, to choose his schedule his way. But in Calderone's eyes, that was a personal insult. He called Elvis that over-famous Southern kid, and said Presley didn't know how to respect Vegas's real power. To a man like Calderone, Elvis wasn't just an artist, he was the one daring to push back the hand everyone else had to grasp. 3 days before the chaos at the International Hotel, the seeds of everything had already sprouted. During a performance, Elvis told a joke. The hotel people in Nevada really know how to persuade artists to cooperate. The audience laughed hard, because it was just light sarcasm about Vegas. But Calderone was in the room that night, sitting center aisle, and he didn't laugh. To him, Presley had just mocked the Mafia in front of thousands, and that couldn't go unpunished. For 3 straight nights after, he drank at the Flamingo Lounge, the bar in the Dunes, then back to the Stardust, like he was following a familiar cycle of violence in his mind. Every time his guys tried to calm him, Calderone downed another drink and repeated, "I'm gonna teach that Presley kid who Vegas really belongs to." He was drunk, but his anger was stone-cold sober. Those around him knew it, because Calderone was the kind of man who never forgot a humiliation in front of a crowd, even if the story hadn't involved him from the start. Those 3 days were like a 3-hour countdown, and everyone could feel Calderone preparing for something more reckless than safe. Vegas always lived in the tense current of power, but when a Chicago outfit capo saw an artist's existence as a personal challenge, the city started shaking in ways no casino wanted, and it all waited for the exact moment to explode. Elvis was at the climax of Suspicious Minds in the International Showroom on the night of July 31st, 1969, the opening night. The International Hotel had bet its reputation on him. The lights shot down through layers of audience, the band kept perfect time, and 3,500 people were entranced, watching Elvis return in form that instantly dissolved any doubts about his movie era. Every move pulled the room into another world, a world where Elvis was absolute center. But right as he sang, we're caught in a trap. Vegas decided to remind everyone this city never lets anyone forget the real rules running it. In the third row, Frank Calderone, Chicago outfit's Las Vegas capo, sat between 2 of his guys, holding his who knows how many whiskey of the night. He'd watched Elvis the whole show with an eye unlike any fan's, and as Elvis turned for the bridge, Calderone shot to his feet. People nearby instinctively recoiled, but no one spoke. He was a familiar VIP across all the big casinos, and in Vegas that meant let him do what he wants. Calderone strode straight to the steps leading up to the stage. A few audience members chuckled softly, thinking it was some surprise interaction Elvis had planned. Elvis loved to joke, to break script on stage, but the sharper ones saw the change in Elvis's face. He wasn't smiling anymore. His eyes narrowed, alert, but still holding that ingrained politeness, the habit of someone raised to respect the audience no matter what. Calderone stepped onto the stage with the confidence of a man who thought the whole room belonged to him. He got right up to Elvis, close enough that the strong liquor smell hit the singer. The band stopped playing instantly, and the crowd noise dropped like it had been choked off. "You think you're so smart?" Calderone growled. No mic needed, but loud enough for all 3,500 to hear every word. "You think you can mock Vegas? Mock me?" Elvis stayed still. He replied politely, voice low and soft. "You've misunderstood." "I didn't." Calderone cut him off, voice like a knife. "Don't get polite with me. I know what you said. I know what you think." Elvis took half a step back, not from fear, but because he'd never faced such direct hostility mid-show. A few scattered murmurs rose from the crowd, but most stayed dead silent. Everyone knew what Calderone's appearance meant. This was Vegas 1969. With official laws and the laws of men like him, and no one was dumb enough to bet on the wrong side. Elvis tried to stay calm. It was just a joke, but before he could finish, Calderone swung. A slap cracked like a gunshot through Elvis's mic, echoing across the room like a blow to Vegas itself. Elvis was knocked backward, crashing hard to the stage floor, hands too slow to catch himself. The collective gasp of all 3,500 people hit at once, a sound anyone in entertainment instantly recognized. Something awful had just crossed every line. Calderone stood over Elvis, eyes showing brutal satisfaction. "Get up," he said, voice full of threat. "Get up, so I can teach you the next lesson." Elvis braced his hands on the stage, breathing hard, lips split, and blood starting to drip down his chin. He said nothing, just struggled to rise, slow and labored, while the whole room watched without anyone daring to move. No security came on stage. A Chicago outfit capo had just slapped the king of rock and roll right in the heart of Vegas. And Vegas, the city of laughter, applause was completely silent. Elvis stood unsteadily, hand on the stage edge for balance. He looked down at the audience, saw thousands of stunned faces, but all locked by fear of Calderone, and in that moment, a truth fell over Vegas like a heavy curtain. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, had been slapped like a nobody on his own stage, and Vegas went dead quiet. While Elvis struggled to stand under Calderone's threatening glare, 28 floors up in a suite overlooking the Strip's neon, Bumpy Johnson sat across from a longtime New York partner. They were discussing a deal on numbers, money flowing through Nevada, a normal conversation in Bumpy's world, quiet, calculated, no need to raise voices to show power. But then a sound cut through everything. Bumpy stopped talking instantly. He turned toward the door, as if someone had called his name. His partner set his whiskey down. "That doesn't sound like a happy crowd." Bumpy rose slowly. He'd lived too long in a world where every noise meant something. And this noise, the gasp of thousands, was something he never ignored. He straightened his vest collar, and walked to the door. As soon as he opened the suite door, a young hotel employee stood outside, face pale and trembling. "Mr. Johnson, please don't go down there. It's Frank Calderone. He's gone crazy." Bumpy looked at him a moment. No anger, no worry, just the calm of someone who'd spent a lifetime in underground wars. "Calderone isn't the first I've met," he said, voice low and solid as stone. The employee stammered. "But he's Vegas Mafia." Bumpy put a hand on his shoulder. "You think I've never met Mafia?" And then he stepped into the elevator. Each floor passed like ticks, building to a confrontation even Vegas didn't expect. When the elevator doors opened on the ground floor, the showroom murmur hit the hallway. Staff clustered, but no one dared approach the stage. As Bumpy walked past, the crowd parted automatically. They looked at him like Harlem had sent its representative to Vegas. Bumpy pushed through the doors into the International Showroom, just as Calderone loomed over Elvis, fists clenched, ready for a second strike. Elvis, still trying to balance, looked up, and for the first time showed real fear in his eyes. Then the lights swept around, across the room, and stopped at the center aisle, where Bumpy Johnson stood. Only one man from Harlem walked straight toward the stage with the bearing of someone who'd never lost a negotiation in his life. As he climbed the steps, the whole room seemed to hold its breath. Many recognized him, not from meeting him in person, but from the look of the stories Vegas folks told about an East Coast boss. Perfect black suit, eyes sharp as knives, calm stance of someone who knew exactly what he could do. Calderone turned, face changing color. He recognized Bumpy instantly, the man many New York capos had warned. "Don't touch unless you want to lose face with the whole outfit." Elvis looked up, and in that moment recognized the man little Bobby Fields had once told him about. "If you ever get in trouble, and if he's in the same building, you'll be safe." Now under Vegas's blinding lights, Elvis truly saw him. Bumpy Johnson. Someone no one thought would show up at a music night, let alone step onto the International Showroom stage, and his appearance changed the entire space. The showroom no longer belonged to Calderone. Vegas no longer belonged to him. The second Bumpy set foot on stage, a truth spread through all 3,500, holding their breath. Harlem had just walked into Vegas, and he hadn't come to watch the show. Bumpy walked straight to center stage and stopped in the exact spot to stand between Elvis and Calderone. Elvis stood behind him, breathing hard, lips still bleeding, but his eyes now held something else, a spark of hope he hadn't even known he was looking for. Calderone stared at Bumpy, momentarily stunned by the impossible appearance in Vegas. Then he tried to rebuild his usual aggression, but the surprise in his eyes couldn't hide. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he roared, voice booming thanks to Elvis's still open mic. "This is Vegas," Bumpy answered, in a low, calm but cutting voice. "I'm the one who's gonna stop you." The room of 3,500 went so silent you could hear hearts beating. Stage lights hit two faces, one flushed red from booze and rage, the other still, cold and fully in control. If Las Vegas had seen backstage casino confrontations, never had one like this played out in front of an audience. Calderone stepped closer, trying to use his bulk to intimidate. "You got no business here," he said, voice low and hard. "Tonight I decide what happens." Bumpy tilted his head slightly. "You forget quick," he said. "Back in the 40s, 50s, I helped plenty of your people in New York. Guys you still call Sir, Genovese, Gigante, and some in the Chicago outfit you're running errands for. Every one of them owes me, more than you think." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room, not loud talk, but the instinctive reaction of a crowd sensing the power balance shifting. Elvis glanced at Bumpy, having only heard Bobby Fields talk about him as a Harlem legend, but now seeing the real flesh-and-blood man, the one who could make all of Vegas hold its breath with a few words. Calderone drew a deep breath, trying to hold his ferocity. "You threatening me?" he asked, but a slight tremor in his voice was easy for outsiders to catch. Bumpy stepped forward half a pace, forcing Calderone to mentally retreat even if his feet didn't move. "No," Bumpy said. "I'm telling you reality." He paused a beat, letting the room choke on silence before continuing. "If you touch Presley again, I guarantee you won't have a place left in any casino from Vegas to Cicero." That wasn't a threat, it was a sentence. Anyone who knew the Mafia world understood Cicero was the Chicago outfit's lifeblood, where Calderone took his cut, sent his guys, laundered money. Bumpy's words weren't just personal warning, they were a direct declaration of war on his entire power base. A capo could take public humiliation, but a capo couldn't take having his money cut off. That was a slow death, more terrifying than a knife in an alley. Calderone scanned the room like a man hunting allies, but everyone just watched him, silent, waiting to see if he still had the guts to take one more step. He looked at the band, they stood frozen, looked at security. No one wanted to get between Harlem and Vegas in that moment. Then he turned back to Bumpy, eyes full of desperate calculation. He knew if he pushed, he'd face not just one man but a 3-decade web of favors even his own outfit didn't want to cross. Calderone stepped back. That retreat said more than any words he'd yelled at Elvis. He gathered what dignity he had left and said, voice hoarse and weak, "This ain't over." Bumpy didn't reply. His silence was the conclusion. Calderone turned, walked off stage, through the aisles he'd thought he owned minutes before. And as he disappeared, applause began. At first sparse, then growing, then exploding into a roaring wave across the showroom. 3,500 people jumped to their feet, clapping like they'd just witnessed not only an act of courage, but a shift in power right before their eyes. Elvis still stared at Bumpy, lip bleeding, chest heaving, but his eyes had changed, no longer fear, but absolute respect. And Bumpy just stood there, silent, like he'd done the most obvious thing in the world. A nearby security guard whispered, "No one's ever made Vegas go quiet like that," then made it stand up at the same time. Except him. That night, Harlem's power had faced Vegas Mafia, and Vegas knew who won. Amid the still echoing applause, Elvis stood behind Bumpy, breathing hard to regain composure. When Bumpy turned around, Elvis, still shaking from the slap, looked at him with unguarded astonishment. They faced each other under the hot lights, on a stage that had just become a battlefield of powers. Elvis had never fully understood. He asked softly, voice breaking, "Why? Why did you help me?" Bumpy looked at Elvis a long time, his eyes no longer cold for Calderone. He stepped closer, placed a heavy but warm hand on Elvis's arm. "You don't know me," Bumpy said. "But you did right by my people before you ever knew my name." Elvis frowned, trying to recall any connection to Bumpy Johnson's world. Bumpy continued, "Little Bobby Fields, 1956, the show in Mississippi." And when Elvis heard the name, memory played back like an old film reel. A young black singer, full of talent, blocked backstage just because of his color. A cold organizer, saying the town's audience wasn't ready for a voice like Bobby's. Elvis remembered that moment clearly, remembered his own voice saying, "If Bobby can't go on, neither will I." It wasn't calculated, Just the right thing he thought he had to do. But to Bobby Fields, it changed a whole life. Bumpy said, "Bobby's Harlem. He's one of mine." And for years, every time he mentioned you, he said the same thing. "If it wasn't for Elvis, I don't know where my life would have gone." Elvis swallowed, the split lip stinging, but it was nothing compared to the emotion rising in his chest. "I just helped, because he was too good to be passed over," Elvis said quietly. Bumpy nodded slightly. "You stood for our music when no one else dared. Black folks have been singing gospel, blues, jazz for 100 years before America paid attention. You didn't steal our music. You respected it, and you respected our people." He paused, then said slowly, "Today I'm paying it back. That's all." Elvis felt heat at the corners of his eyes, though he wasn't the type to cry on stage. He extended his hand. Bumpy took it. His big, strong hand, gripping Elvis's in a sign of mutual recognition, not between a star and a boss, but between two men who understood loyalty was rare in this world. "Thank you," Elvis said, voice choked. Bumpy let go, looked at him a moment to make sure Elvis was still steady after the slap and shock. "You still got a show to finish," Bumpy said. "The audience is waiting." Elvis touched his lip, saw dried blood on his fingertip. He looked across the stage, still bright, still alive with the breath of thousands who'd just seen something no one thought real. "I don't know if I can keep singing," he admitted. Bumpy gave a rare small smile. "You're Elvis Presley. You get up and you sing." Elvis took a deep breath, turned back to the mic. Applause rose again, but this time not just for the star's return, for the courage of the man who'd stood up after the most humiliating slap of his career. The band looked at him, waiting for the cue. Elvis nodded. "Gospel," he said. "Start with gospel." That wasn't in the script, but it was how Elvis told the whole room he knew who he owed the music to, and who he owed the people. The keyboard opened with familiar chords. Elvis closed his eyes and sang the opening lines of a song he'd held in his heart since childhood in southern black churches. The audience stood silent, no one speaking, just listening. They heard a man singing not to perform, but to thank. When the song ended, Elvis bowed his head. The room erupted in applause, this time ringing like a declaration that music, courage, and honor could reach places Mafia power never could. At the back of the stage, Bumpy stood watching Elvis with the eyes of someone who knew he'd kept a promise no one else could. And that night, Vegas understood one thing: favors never die. Some favors traveled from Harlem all the way to the lights of the International Hotel, and when they showed up, they changed everything. When Elvis left the stage to get stitches in his split lip, and the International Showroom still buzzed with endless talk, Bumpy returned to his suite on the 28th floor, with the air of someone who just finished something inevitable. But he hadn't even sat down when the phone rang. It was the private line. Only people in Bumpy's world knew. He picked up, saying nothing first. On the other end, a slow Midwestern voice spoke. "Mr. Johnson, I hear you made big waves in Vegas tonight." Bumpy replied shortly, "I did what needed doing." The other end gave a light laugh. Not amused, but the laugh of someone who'd seen enough chaos in life. "Calderone acted stupid," he said. "He hurt our business, slapping an artist on stage, in front of 3,500 people. That's not how you keep order in Vegas." Bumpy stayed silent. He let the quiet stretch, the kind that forces the other side to fill it. "Our people met," the voice continued. "Calderone's out of Vegas. We don't want his hands on any casino or contract anymore. Not because of you. Because he was dumb. Then the voice dropped lower. But don't get it wrong, Johnson. Don't think we always back down. You won tonight because you were right. And because you were smart. Not because you're stronger. Bumpy leaned back in his chair. I'm not looking for war, he said. I just wanted fairness. Presley didn't deserve to be humiliated on stage. No one says he did, the voice replied. But Vegas doesn't like outsiders meddling in internal business. Bumpy gave a dry, sharp laugh. I'm not an outsider. The other end went quiet a few seconds, as if weighing how true that was. And the truth was, Bumpy was right. In America's underworld, from New York to Chicago to Harlem, he'd never been an outsider. Anyway, the voice went on, tonight ends here. No one touches you. Vegas doesn't need more trouble. Bumpy nodded, though the other couldn't see. I didn't come here to cause trouble, but if someone tries to stop Elvis from doing what he's good at, I won't stand still. You've always been a man of principle, the voice said softly, half respect, half caution. Just don't forget principles. Sometimes get people killed early. Bumpy answered without hesitation. People without principles die even faster. On the other end, a sigh, then the click of a lighter for a cigar. All right, Johnson, get some rest. Vegas'll be quiet a few days. Consider it you helping us clean up a mess. I'm not cleaning for you, Bumpy replied. I'm protecting someone worth protecting. Fair enough, the voice said. And this time, we're not against you. Then the line went dead, just long silence in the hotel room, where a Harlem boss had just spoken directly to one of Chicago's most powerful underworld figures. Bumpy set the phone down, looked out the window where Vegas lights still flashed, like the city had no idea it had just been pulled back to a fragile line between chaos and order. He didn't smile, but his eyes said it all. What happened tonight wasn't a victory, but a balance restored. Calderon was wrong, so Bumpy was right. And in America's underworld, that was something rarely admitted straight out. Bumpy put on his hat, said quietly to himself, I don't want war, I just want fairness. And though Vegas didn't hear those words, that night they were enforced absolutely. In the days after that event, Vegas stopped talking about Elvis's opening set. They talked about Bumpy Johnson. They talked about the slap the whole city heard. And about the moment a man from Harlem stepped onto the International Showroom stage to end a madness spreading like fire across the desert. But the conversation didn't just happen in bars or staff break rooms. It started spreading to the places stories were usually kept tightest. Casino executive offices, count rooms, tables where power was traded with glances more than words. Elvis, with a few stitches in his lip and face still swollen, sat in his private room with his closest people and retold what happened over and over. But every time, he always mentioned Bumpy with the same line. He wasn't an ordinary man. He showed up right when I thought I had no one on my side. For Elvis, it wasn't just rescue. It was the moment he saw clearly the line between icon and real human being, and the only one standing on the human side was a Harlem boss he'd only heard about through Bobby Fields. Black artists in Vegas heard the news and were proud to tears. They called Elvis brother, not because he was a star, but because he'd once stood up for one of them, when the whole system wanted to crush Bobby Fields. Now they saw that favor returned publicly, right in front of all Vegas. One black lounge artist at Caesars said, Elvis has a black heart. That night showed God doesn't let that be forgotten. Rumors of Bumpy Johnson challenging a Vegas capo spread so fast that within days it had dozens of versions. Some said Bumpy just glared, and Calderon shook. Some said Bumpy brought a whole Harlem crew to Vegas, standing outside as warning. Some even said Bumpy and Elvis had known each other for years. a wild version but one that felt more plausible the more people saw how Bumpy stood before Elvis that night. But no matter how the story got embellished, its core never changed. A Vegas capo had been forced to back down under the lights, and the one forcing him wasn't another Mafia rival, but a man from Harlem. As for Calderone, he vanished from the International Hotel almost immediately. 3 days later, his usual VIP booth was empty. A week later, no one saw him at the Flamingo or Stardust. 2 weeks later, even his closest guys didn't know where he was. Vegas started whispering the usual underworld questions. Was he transferred to Reno? Did Chicago call him back for re-education? Or did the outfit eliminate him for damaging business? No one answered, and no one dared ask directly. But what Vegas knew for sure, Calderone had been erased from the city's power picture, and one night Elvis got slapped. One night Bumpy Johnson stepped onto the stage like fate had scripted it. One night that made the most powerful understand. There are favors, underground lines, and people even the Mafia has to respect. And for Elvis that night marked something deeper. He'd once been loved for his charisma, voice, and style. But after that night, he was respected by those who understood he wasn't just an icon. He was a man who knew to stand with those America usually left behind. The night of July 31st, 1969, didn't just change Vegas, it changed Elvis Presley too. And Vegas, no matter how glamorous, would never forget the night one slap exposed the city's true soul, and a man from Harlem forced it to go silent. And as the stories of that night kept spreading, from Vegas lounges to small New York bars, people started realizing the event at the International Showroom wasn't just a chaotic moment in entertainment history. It was a rare slice, showing America was far more complex than the stories we usually hear. Elvis Presley, the biggest white icon of pop culture, had been protected not by police, not by hotel management, but by a black boss from Harlem, a man the system saw as criminal, but who acted with a sense of honor many self-proclaimed decent folks never reached. In an America still full of invisible racial lines, where big stages remained white territory and back roads were where black people were controlled step by step, that night blurred those boundaries in just minutes. Calderone's slap wasn't just aimed at Elvis, it targeted the order. Vegas thought it could impose on anyone, but Bumpy Johnson's appearance proved the opposite, that strength doesn't only come from fame, financial power, or the guns an organization keeps in storage. Strength comes from how people treat each other when no one forces them to do right. Elvis didn't save Bobby Fields expecting a favor back. Bumpy didn't step on stage to show off power. Both acted on the same principle the world often undervalues: loyalty, kindness, and an uncompromising sense of right and wrong. Many only knew Bumpy Johnson through Harlem stories, sharp intelligence, shadowy deals, battles with Italian Mafia, but for those who witnessed July 31st, 1969, his image was different. It wasn't a gangster on stage, it was a man who understood honor sometimes matters more than profit, and loyalty sometimes stronger than the power network running beneath him. He didn't appear to start a war. He appeared to remind Vegas no one could use violence to humiliate an innocent person while he was in the same building. That night, Bumpy didn't just save Elvis Presley, he reminded all of Las Vegas that sometimes courage doesn't come from those expected to show it. It comes from those who know the price, but still step forward. And in an era full of injustice and division, that's what makes this story live forever. So the final question for you: have you ever seen anyone dare stand up when everyone else stayed silent? And more importantly, in the decisive moment of your life, will you be the one watching or the one stepping forward? If you love stories about courage, loyalty, and moments that change an entire city, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.